Welcome to this series on natural law and consciousness. We're looking at methods of mind control, and today we're looking at controlled opposition. Controlled opposition sets two antithetical sides against one another in a play. It's an act or a fiction. The elite controllers, from a higher viewpoint, can control, they can witness what goes on in this conflict, and they can keep the spoils of what's gained out of that conflict. A metaphor for this is a chessboard, where an unseen hand will control the outcome. The ultimate example of this is war. War is controlled opposition. It's an example of divide and conquer. No matter who wins in a conflict of war, the elites will always benefit from the conflict. So, what are examples of controlled opposition? Politics. In New Zealand, National versus Labour. United States, Democrats versus Republican, etc., etc. In sports, now regardless of who wins a game, the profits go to the same people. War. In many cases, both sides of the conflict are financed by the same bankers. Banking and finance. Fascism versus communism or socialism. Electric versus fossil fuels. Now, alternative energy sources that provide near to free energy have been suppressed. So we're stuck with two alternatives, and neither of them are particularly good for the environment. What is opposition? Opposition is resistance. It's tension, conflict, expressed in action or argument. It can be expressed as a competition between rivals or political rivals, sports teams. It's like a debate between two sides who play against each other. So participants in this dialectic, they're missing something in themselves, in their psyche, that they are seeking to satisfy in the controlled opposition. For example, in politics, the participant, i.e. the voter, now they lack a vehicle for creating change in their lives. The voter lacks knowledge of themselves, ultimately, so they want an external figure to be a proxy for creating change, for creating a better life for themselves. So people look for external figures, and the choices are there provided. They believe that they'll receive change. However, there's no political figure, no matter how well intentioned, will correct the fundamental societal problems. Now, the participants in the dialectic, they will still need to gain self-knowledge that they sought. But this change is not happening in people because they are investing their time into a controlled puppet show that was never real. It makes no difference if you vote National or Labour, Democrat or Republican, Conservative or Liberal, because whatever political party you choose, the same dynamic forces will control the outcome. There will be no real change. Change comes from self-knowledge. We create the change in the world through moral action. Occultists rule the financial world and the banking institutions. There are occult or hidden forces that control humanity's mind and thinking. It's like the Wizard of Oz. People look at the puppet show, but not behind the curtain to see who's pulling the strings. And dialectics is the tool it is used. It is used to create seeming opposites that are both sides, the liberal and the conservative, and the media creates the storyline. Now, this dialectic or controlled opposition is always to get one to look at the controlled opposition, never to look at oneself and to work on the self. The dialectic is all a distraction, so there will never be any real change in society, any real benefit to people. The allegory is of Plato's cave, and this perfectly illustrates this continual distraction. Now, the high-level occultists, they always want war, constant war. They manufacture the weapons. They manage the conflict. They manage the debt. They own the fuel. And they meter it out to create a consciousness of scarcity and limitation. They manage the mechanisms through which wars are fought, including weaponry, energy, and the money needed for both. It's the same central banks that will fund both sides of a conflict, resulting in enormous debt for the people and enormous profits for the bankers. The debt that arises from fighting wars is used to control countries. The Hegelian dialectic is a type of dialectic. It is thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, or problem, reaction, and solution. Or another way of looking at it is chaos, confusion, and opportunity. A chaotic situation is created. Confusion is the result. It's an example of chaos sorcery. These elitists create the problem, then they attribute the blame to someone else. Then people react, asking the government for help because they're in fear. They don't want to solve the problems themselves. Then the government steps in with the solution that they had planned all along. Now, this solution would have been unpopular if there hadn't have been chaos to start with, to motivate people through fear. Manipulating consciousness into circular patterns of thoughts and actions that guide our thoughts and actions into conflict. And that leads to the predetermined outcome and the solution that they had wanted all along. And dialectics is a far more effective prison than a dictatorship. With a dictatorship, you can see the prison bars. And if you know that you're in prison, then any prisoner would want to escape. But if you don't see the prison bars, if you're given the illusion of choice with the dialectical system, you will never see the dictatorship that elitists manage. This concludes this episode on controlled opposition. Next time we'll have a look at the financial system.